Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Audio's good, video's good. I've already got 10 coming on the UATV chat. DLive chat's rolling. So good evening. I'm kind of pleased to be able to show you this. I know a lot of the subscribers have it already, but this is the new LawDog files. It's not just the LawDog files. It also includes African Adventures, and it's a fantastic book. It's actually two books, technically, but absolutely hysterical. The usual printed end papers. It's quality across the board, some original illustrations and so forth. So this is actively shipping, the LawDog files, and the Promethean by Owen Stanley, the sort of companion novel to The Missionaries, is also shipping. So, and we're working hard on getting Junior Classics 7 and 8 out to you. This is not the topic. I'm just mentioning it while we're here. Another thing I want to mention as people are rolling in is John Della Rose, Archaven contributor, Flying Sparks author, Arctoons contributor. He is now on Unauthorized, and I encourage you to check out his videos or podcast, not just because it's a different take on the comics industry, which, as you know, is one of our chosen offensives, but he comes at it from a very different perspective than the legend Chuck Dixon. Sure, you can see the cover again. It's quite good, I think. Again, this one is not our usual image-focused one. We're experimenting with bringing in some of the Franklin Library look. This is kind of a combination of the image and the abstract. Franklin always goes highly abstract, although you can see that it actually forms a badge in there. So it's an interesting and I think intriguing combination of both, and it's really good. I mean, it's some of the library books we do are like books that we're really heavily focused on. Other books are more in the category of oh wait, we need to get a cover for that and that sort of thing. So it's always a nice surprise when one of the books that are not one of the primary focus books turns out as well as that. Dan and Georgia says, I'd rather live and work with a socialist that was anti-immigration nationalist than an open borders warmonger civnat. We're going to get to that, Dan. We're getting to that. But first I'm going to read you something. I read a really great book last night. It's by a gentleman named Luigi Barzini. He's most famous for a book called The Italians, which I have not yet read. But I was reading his series of essays, which is called From Caesar to the Mafia. And it was really interesting. He even talks about the author of The Leopard and interviews his wife. Talks about Sicily. He's of Sicilian descent. Actually introduced me to two new Sicilian authors that I'm now interested in reading. But I thought that this was really an interesting point that he made when he was talking about, and he lived in America for a while, so he has an interesting perspective on both the U.S. and Italy. But what I thought was really interesting here in light of the topic tonight, which is that ideology and the Enlightenment are dead, is that he's talking here about experts. And but I think that it's a larger point. I think it's a more relevant and broader point than that. He says, this is what really interests the experts is to prove to themselves and to their readers that the Italian problem has now been settled once and for all, and that no surprises are expected or will be tolerated. And what he means by that is Italy's always been two countries, the North and the South, and they're pretty incompatible. That's considered the Italian problem. They've spent billions and billions of dollars trying to get the South to be more like the North, but all that happens is the South keeps falling further and further behind. This is what they want to believe. Italy is now a stable country, reasonably well run by a seemly coalition of parties with quotable programs. The American establishment, which is backing this formula and has definitely financed its victory, has therefore not made a mistake. The communists are definitely on their way out. Nobody will henceforth raise uncomfortable new issues and really try to improve conditions. The most significant aspect of this view, and the proof of its fragility, is the irascibility with which these experts consider all kinds of dissenting opinions. To maintain their own tranquility and to pacify their readers, they even abandon a long-held enlightened belief that no champion of democracy can be worthy of his name if he does not respect the opposition, believe in its utility, and uphold its rights. And that's exactly what we've seen in the States and in Western Europe as well. What we've seen is that all of the talk about rights, all of the talk about democracy, all of the talk about all of this Enlightenment philosophy going back to the 18th century, all of the brave Voltaire, I might not agree with what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it. All that stuff has turned out to be, as the monarchists always believed it to be, total bullshit. It's not true. All those rights don't exist. It was all just an act. It was all just an excuse. It was literally nothing more than rhetoric. It was just a lie. And what's fascinating about Barzini seeing that, even though he's coming at it from a different perspective, he was talking about the pro-Western, pro-American, anti-communist perspective on Italy. But it's just fascinating to me that, this guy wrote this book back in, I'm looking it up here. Published in 2002, I think. So he died not too terribly long ago, I think. What's really interesting to me, too, is that the introduction to this was written by Michael Ledeen. You know who Michael Ledeen is? Michael, Jew, faster, please, invade the entire Middle East. Ledeen's kind of an interesting character because on the one hand, he's a total neo-clown. But on the other hand, he seems to have a genuine appreciation for European history in general and Italy in particular. So he's, you kind of wonder how he manages to balance both of those things. Especially, he writes a really favorable introduction to this, and yet Barzini is right there calling out the entire Enlightenment. Akbar says, the rising tide of freedom seems to have some sewage in it. No question. What we see is that the very people who push it only push it as long as it's useful to them. It's just like free speech. Oh, we have to accept blasphemy because otherwise we won't be free. But you better not criticize anybody with skin that's darker than a certain shade, or we'll make sure that you can't work, you can't buy anything, you can't participate in society. What is that if not a ideological blasphemy law? And so, what we're really coming to understand is that the Enlightenment was never anything more than an attempt to destroy Christendom. An attempt to replace its pillars with these pillars of rhetoric. And the thing is, you really begin to understand how stupid it is once you have enough distance from it. When you see the Civnats and people who are still under the sway of the rhetorical spell reciting it as if it's meaningful. When people say, well, as it says on the poem at the feet of the Statue of Liberty, who gives a flying fuck what some poet wrote 250 years after the fact? The whole melting pot. People talk about America's a melting pot. It's a melting pot. You should read the play, The Melting Pot. It's got a great bit of rhetoric right at the end of it. The rest of it reads like an early version of Brighton Beach Memoirs. It's nonsense. It has nothing to do with anything that you think it might have to do with politics, America, etc., etc. Yeah, it's really funny. They talk about Jesus being the refugee. From what? It's like that old question. So, who does was it either a consonant? It's either no. It's like, who does Jerusalem belong to? And they've got that Henry. Does it belong to the Jews? Does it belong to the Palestinians? And Henry Cavill says, Rome. Jesus was living as a subject of the Roman Empire. That whole bit about then Caesar ordered a census, which is why he was having to go back to Bethlehem? Well, guess who has to obey the dictates of the Roman emperor? A subject of the Roman Empire. The Idaho Crusader says the melting pot is frightening when read from a Christian perspective, neo-Babalism through and through. No question. Absolutely no question. And the USA is finished. I mean, the Republic died in 1865. That was when the Republic died and the U.S. Empire was born. It's no different. People didn't recognize the change. People still don't really recognize the change. But the historians of the future will. That's when it ceased to be a voluntary union, and it became an empire where one group ruled over the other. And, we've just seen things continue. It was an American empire. And then after World War II, it became a global empire. And sometime after 1965, it became a global empire ruled by foreigners. Joe Biden, not an American. All of his advisors, not American. None of them, literally none of them, have any relationship to the Founding Fathers. None of them are the posterity which the Constitution, for whom the Constitution was written. If you want to know why they don't care what the Constitution says, they know the Constitution was not written by their fathers, and it was not written for them. As far as they're concerned, it's just yet another set of rules that you have to figure out your way around, which is exactly what it was. Now, what's interesting is that the pretense is ending. Donald Trump is raging about this judge in New York who just, apropos of nothing, announced that his corporate license are all yanked because of fraud. Well, every single Hollywood corporation would have to disappear. Every single bank, Netflix, Amazon, all of those companies are committing significant fraud. I'm not saying that Trump's companies aren't. I'm not defending him at all. Personally, I'm extremely amused by his outrage and his attempt to be outraged. They're not following the rules. Really? You just noticed it now? My dad was getting spun around by government authorities not following the rules back in 1982. But what's interesting is that all of the isms, all of the ideologies are now being shown to be totally bankrupt. None of them cling to their supposed principles. None of them hold to their supposed beliefs as soon as it isn't in the interests of their favored parties. You look at the feminists. How come the feminists don't support the trannies? Right? Why would they deny the trannies the right to do what they did to the men? On what grounds can they possibly deny it? The very biology that they deny? Sam says, how could you be outraged when you let them steal the election for you after conceding on almost everything while they attacked you? Yeah, obviously we hope that there's something positive being done behind the scenes that we don't know, but frankly, and there are some indications, there are some moments of high weirdness that it's not possible to balance on the basis of the mainstream narrative. But it's just, I don't understand what Trump is expecting to accomplish in terms of outrage, unless, of course, the whole thing is just for show. If he's genuinely in control, if he's genuinely showing people just how bad it is so that it will allow him to take the very strict and appalling measures that will be absolutely necessary to give the U.S. any chance of survival, it could make sense, but we can't. We can only comment on what we are told and what we see and what we know is at least superficially happening. And the pace of the nonsense, the pace of the convergence is incredible. E.G. Prime says, I assume you've seen that 94% of S&P 100 jobs went to non-white applicants. Yeah, that was on the blog yesterday, or maybe the day before. And like I said this isn't something to get upset about. Why the hell would any of you want to work for a Converge company? This is a fantastic opportunity for anyone who has skills that those companies are going to need, because now you can set up as a contractor and charge them 5 times more than you could have working for them, because I guarantee those employees of color are not going to even accomplish 10% of what those corporations need done. And in fact, I would be willing to bet that within 3 years, we're going to see a record number of civil rights and discrimination lawsuits filed against those companies by those new workers, because they're not going to work, they're not going to perform, and they're not going to permit themselves to be held accountable. Another thing that Barzini was writing about was the problem with things down south in Italy. And the problem that they've got there is they send tons of money down. Rome sends tons of money down to Calabria, to Sicily. But it doesn't do any good, because people there, not unlike Africans and some other peoples, Indians in particular, they look at the money being provided to them for projects and investment. They view that as largesse that's meant to be distributed to their friends and family. So it never goes anywhere. No, they're not looking at it as a responsibility. Those employees of color are not looking at a job the way that the European and American applicants were. A job is just something that you maneuver to get, and then you collect it. It's like owning a cow. If you have a cow, the cow just provides you milk. You don't have to do anything to get the cow to provide you milk. You have to make sure it gets fed, right? But that's how they look at jobs. A job is just something that gives you money. Sam says there's a reason the mafia comes from Palermo and not Alto Adige or Piemonte. Anyhow, it's really remarkable times, and don't blame people too much for still buying into the rhetoric, because you used to, and I know I used to. I remember being at the 1988 Republican State Convention, and then the Republican National Convention, and they would play that song by Lee Atwood, "Proud to be an American," and half the people, all the boomers, are choked up with tears in their eyes, and the the young Republicans when it got to be, and I'm proud to be a, and then instead of American, they'd all shout Republican. Total nonsense. Total lunacy. Total falsehood. Dan says, I hate that song too. Trump still plays that Dorkies. Well, Trump has to play it. You can't get elected without appealing to the CivNats now. Jeez, hang on a second. I gotta see what's going on here. Oh, I just got a message. This is actually blog related, much to my surprise. What's it say? Oh, it says, your ability to send traffic is astonishing. Oh, okay. Anyhow, apparently a lot of you got interested in Tree of Woe and subscribed to it. So thanks very much for supporting Alex McCree. He's a good friend, far more important to our side than anybody except me realizes. And, I'm glad that people are supporting his work and finding it useful. He's got one of the best Substacks out there, in my opinion. I wish I had the time to write in-depth analytical pieces the way that he does. But anyhow, is pro-life a sacred cow for the right? Yes and no. It is a sacred cow, but it should be. Who cares that Chelsea Handler goes barren? Well, what do you mean by pro-life then? Nobody cares that Chelsea Handler goes barren. It's good for America that a foreign invader like her does decide not to have children. But abortion is a terrible thing. I mean, that's like saying, well, do we really want to prevent the Aztecs from practicing their religion? Abortion is literally a Jewish and satanic ritual. It's at least partly religious, for certain evil groups, and this is not according to me. This is according to them, right? And so, no, we do not want to permit that in a civilized Christian society. All the stuff about, well, exceptions for rape and incest and life. No, it's just, it's a non-starter. And yes, I understand that, well, white people would be even more overrun if it wasn't for abortion. Well, maybe they wouldn't, because, abortion has nothing to do with tens of millions of immigrants. So, for me, pro-life is an absolute. It's no more to be discussed than guns. Pillow Vendor says, out of all the millions of people in America, why Chelsea Handler? Actually, yeah, Raging Zoomer. Why Chelsea Handler? Let's see. Anyhow, yeah, Sam says, the argument for abortion is like saying, should we really stop Ebola from spreading among the foreigners here? Yes. Yes, Chelsea Handler is Jewish. She will inform you of that. if you make the mistake of listening to her talk for more than a minute or two. Anyhow, what we need to do intellectually is simultaneously go back to the fundamentals, go back to what works. We need to be willing to question all of our assumptions, all of them. If you're Protestant, you really do need to look at how the Protestant churches got started. In some cases, seems like a good thing. Other cases, not so much. If you're Catholic, maybe you need to look at who started the schism. There's, because at the end of the day, we don't see anything clearly. We see as though through a glass darkly, and we have been down a false path. There's no question whatsoever that we have been down a false path since the 18th century. A lot of that soaring rhetoric that appealed to you and me and a lot of us so much when we were younger, whether it's the 407 years ago or whether it's all men are created equal, all of that is bullshit. All of it. The Constitution is totally irrelevant because the American posterity no longer rules or controls the state. Cliff Cosmic even says, I've begun to think Amazing Grace was a tool for subverting the churches. I don't think so. But then again, the story about what didn't the guy supposedly survive the wreck of the Titanic or something? I seem to recall that he survived some sort of shipwreck. If it was the Titanic, then I'm kind of a bit wondering. As a song, it's all about patting yourself on the back and only mentions God. I disagree. Because the song is talking about God's grace. You don't have to mention something specifically when it is implicitly applied. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not the religious music policeman. So, Dan aptly points out the Constitution doesn't work in Liberia either. No, they tried it. The whole concept of rights that are invented by 18th century Europeans and are just declared ex nihilo to be universal is obviously nonsense. It's obviously false. And the thing that's interesting is that you're starting to see conservatives beginning to debate the concept of natural right, which is very important because the concept of natural rights is what led us to where we are now. And that's why I'm saying it's important to go back to the fundamentals of what are we? What is our starting point? Our starting point is that we are creatures. We're creatures that were created by our Creator. We know that the creation has been infected by evil because we see it. We feel it. We do it. We live it. And we also know that the only thing that is capable of combating and standing against that evil is Jesus Christ. Everything else builds from there. And you can go ahead and try to tear any part of that apart. It's not going to work. Austin points out that if I was the religious song police, there would be a lot more guitar solos and hymns. True. Definitely true. Why call baby killing abortion? Because killing a baby to most people means baby to most people means a child that has already been born. So, you can't fix rhetoric. This is something to keep in mind. Rhetoric works or doesn't work on its own. You can't try to logic your way into making ineffective rhetoric effective or vice versa. Dan points out abortion was originally a synonym for miscarriage. And then it took on the context of, intentional, an intentionally caused miscarriage. So it's an appropriate term. Yeah, I've never. I understand that people think, well, if we say baby killing, people react badly to the idea of killing babies, but they react badly to the idea of killing babies because they're thinking about babies that have already been born. So you can't change what you're essentially attempting to do there, Sigma and Omega, is to change the definition, the popular, common definition of baby. You can't do that in rhetoric. The gray man points out, defending our divinely inspired Constitution. Yeah. Is that the piece that, what is it, the guy who wrote that 9/11 election or whatever, his name wasn't known, and he wrote a piece during the 2016 election, and it was just everywhere. And then he wrote this piece defending natural rights, which I've actually bookmarked. I'm planning to go over and dissect in some detail. I think that might be the piece that I was planning on looking at. But anyhow, Grayman says the Mises Institute and Lew Rockwell people never moved past 2008. Well, here's the thing that's really interesting, and I was really thinking about this when I was reading the Barzini book, is nobody saw the current situation coming where all the nations of the West have been invaded en masse by people from Africa and India and China. And I mean, nobody saw this coming. And nobody expected Russia to bounce back and become capable of going toe-to-toe with the United States so quickly. China's less of a surprise. China has been inevitable. I mean, Unrestricted Warfare was published in 1999. Wang Hunin wrote America Against America back. When did he publish that? Could someone look that up? America Against America by Wang Hunin. I think he published it like in the 1980s. And so, granted, people sometimes say that I'm 20 years ahead of the mainstream. Wang Hunin was like 20 years ahead of me. But the point is that people saw that coming. People saw the rise of China coming. You know, David Wingrove didn't write Chung Kuo about Indonesia. You know, I mean, to me, it's kind of ironic that of all the science fiction out there, it might be Chung Kuo that is the only one that is even remotely relevant. 1991, right? So not quite as perspicacious as I'd been thinking, but still amazingly impressive. I mean, he was 10 years ahead of me. Does Putin have any heirs? That would be helpful if the ROC makes him a Tsar. Well, he does have some children with his wife, and he's got at least 4 with that pretty little gymnast that has, been his longtime mistress. So anyhow, he's well stocked that way. I don't know if the Russian political system is going to go that way, but it's interesting and it's obvious that democracy was always nonsense. And people talk about, well, the founders knew it. That's why they created a republic. Well, yeah, but they said you can only keep a republic if you're lucky and moral. The U.S. lost its republic early on. Idaho Crusaders feeling a little pessimistic. He says the number of catastrophes headed for the U.S. is a little mind-boggling. Well, that's what happens when you put a group of really evil people who have never, ever, in their entire history, successfully run a society in charge. I mean, going back to something like the, 2nd or 3rd century AD, wherever the Jews have ended up settled and gained power, it's always turned out badly for everybody, including themselves. I mean, it's. I was talking to Owen, and I was talking about how much I admire the early Zionists, not because of their tendency towards socialism or anything, but the attempt to reject the parasitical past and try to do their own thing. They developed what they called the Sabra self-image. Being strong and self-reliant and growing your own crops. I mean, frankly, there's more than it's very ironic, I know, but there's more than a few similarities between what Owen and the Bears are trying to do and what the early Zionists were trying to do, back in the early 20th century. But then you've still got the neo-clowns, the diasporans, etc., who are still playing the game of, hey, let's get rich and try to guide society, and so forth. Avalanche says they're not dropping parasitism very well. Keep in mind that the U.S. The massive U.S. financial support came much, much later. Originally Israel was an ally of the Soviet Union. And don't forget, that for all the money that is sent over to Israel, an equal amount is sent over to Egypt, right? I'm not saying any of it is good. And in fact, the interesting thing is the smarter Israelis, the Martin Van Crevelds and so forth, correctly point out that it's a really bad idea to make yourself reliant on foreign sources. Al Dente, speaking of public intellectuals, Al Dente says, have you had any communication with N.N. Taleb since publishing his books? No, in fact, we haven't even gotten the books to him. We've been trying to figure out where to send them. We actually have an obligation to send them to him, but we don't know where. So Al Dente would imagine he respects your intellect. We actually had a little bit, before I got kicked off of Twitter, we actually had a little direct interaction. He mentioned at one point that he was reading SJWs Always Lie. And we did and he did express some appreciation for a couple of the memes that I created when he was engaged in a public battle with English pseudo-historian Mary Beard. She was the face of black people used to be English. Yes, I'm permanently off of Twitter. After Musk came back and announced that everybody was welcome and that sort of thing, I sent an email requesting a reinstatement, and I got back an email saying your account will never be restored. Space Money says, I should probably ask him. I mean, honestly, the only reason that I requested it was not because I was particularly interested in returning to Twitter, but I just wanted to see if Musk was telling the truth, because I strongly suspected that he wasn't. So, based on what? It's not based on anything. They just make stuff up. I'll show you a few of them. They're pretty funny. Let's see here. I need to go large so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, yeah, this was, I think, one of the first ones. The Carthage, the Klingon colony. You'll have to forgive me, but I thought these were very funny. So, if I'm laughing at my own jokes, you'll understand. Let's see. Molyneux was unbanned but decided not to return. His ban was especially egregious. Yeah, mine was too. I not only did I not do anything, they didn't even accuse me of doing anything. I mean, it was just like, yeah, we can't have you on there anymore. Oh, this was a good one. Mary Beard, the Celts, on BBC Two. And I think my personal favorite was this one. Actually, I did one or two Talib ones too during that time frame. I'll find those next. But here, okay, this was the one. She was really pissed off about these because they actually look exactly like her books, and so the real Henry VIII. I was just so happy to find the picture, the painting of the guy with that outfit. Let me see if I can find one of the Talib ones. Well, I have them somewhere, but I don't know. They're not listed under anything that that I can that I see. Oh, by the way, this one was kind of funny. I'm just like flipping through my old meme folder here. Oh, here we go. This was kind of funny. Talib was amused by it, but then he was like, "Yeah, maybe don't don't keep pushing that." I like the quote. "NN Talib was mean to me," by Mary Beard. "He is the devil, and he said I was wrong. He shouldn't be allowed to do that." Yeah. So, anyhow, good times. Any chance of getting the images posted to SG? Well, maybe sometime what I'll do is instead of doing a meme review, I'll do a classic meme, classic Vox memes, Darkstream, and we can go over all of them. Pillowbetter says, "These are real and not memes." Oh my. People have reported that if you keep appealing, it will get reinstated eventually. Yeah, that may be. I mean, maybe if I have some time to actually think about that, I'll do that. I mean, I don't really even have much time to. I'm lucky if I can put something up on Gab. I did. I did put something up on Gab that went pretty big today. It was a picture of Chris Christie wearing what I suppose are going to be shorts, and the position he's standing in. I mean, his upper body and his lower body don't even look like they're connected to each other, and I mean, it looks like a graphic glitch. And I just said, "What phenotype is this? No, what phylum is this? I mean, it doesn't even look human, you know?" So, anyhow, it is a mystery. So, but the thing that I want you to take away from this is to understand that all ideology, all isms are worthless. They're rhetoric. And attempting to base policy on words designed for the purposes of emotional manipulation is a bad idea. Because whenever push comes to shove, they will actually violate their supposedly sacred principles. Frankly, the more people talk about their principles being sacred, the more you should scent BS. The more you should scent sulfur. So that's all I've got. We're going to get a newsletter out for the library here in the next day or 3. Hopefully I'll be able to get to it tomorrow. And other than that, keep the faith. Stay strong. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.